I'm in Garden Report special afternoon live stream. It feels like we do these a lot.
Yes, sir.
And
when you cover the Celtics,
yeah, it's crazy, right? We're not even close to the end conclusion of the NBA season, and Celtics just keep jumping in there with news. And then today, first reported by Adrian Wojnarowski, and then kind of confirmed by lots of different people along the way, the Celtics are going to hire Ime Udoka as the team's new head coach. Which instantly was received with a lot of people really liked this hire. It really felt like it was down to him, maybe Ham, and I know Billups was kind of kicking around there as a possibility, though it looked more likely that Chauncey was going to go to Portland. That being the case, this happened, and it happened today. The Celtics are the first team to name their new head coach this offseason, which I kind of like. And even if, honestly, this is appearances only, I like the fact that if Billups was indeed their number one, I like the fact that they didn't look like they had their second pick, and for all we know, Udoka was the guy all along, and that's what they wanted. We don't have anything from the team. It's not official yet, but it is out there. So, interested to hear like reaction from players, from the team itself, and everything there. And obviously, we're going to have, I'm sure, a press conference and other things in the coming days. But this is the guy. So we have the coach. Two major offseason dominoes have fallen already. And, we're going to fill up the chat here, and we're curious your comments as well. But we had for sure Kemba Walker was the thing that had to happen, and a coach had to happen, and boom, bang, bang, both of those things checked off pretty quick. So you guys, initial reaction to the hire?
Brad's 2 for 2. Bobby said that earlier. I'm going to keep it going for sure. I think he got this one right. And that's a good point by you, John, because I do think that may have been sort of the language throughout that interview, or maybe the last interview between Brad and Udoka, about how, hey, look, if this works, if we can make this work, let's do it right away. Let's not waste any time. Let's send out the great message to our team, to the players, that, look, we made a decision because it's not about, oh, let's wait until one of these candidates makes a decision between two teams. We're going with you. The Brooklyn Nets were bounced out of the playoffs. I'm not sure who it was, but someone mentioned that. Actually, I think it was Bobby. Someone tweeted that out, that, hey, if the Celtics are going to make a serious run at it, maybe you should do it now instead of weighing your options a couple of weeks down the road and just pretty much showing your cards, right? That would be showing your cards to Udoka, that was like, yeah, you're one of our top guys, but we really want to have one more conversation. No. So now that's out the window. No, you're our guy. We believe in you. We believe in the relationship you had with Tatum and Brown, or at least the fact that you guys can build on that. I do think we talked about this a couple of nights ago, that this was something that was discussed with those two. I think it had to have been. I think Brad is certainly in the position to do stuff like that, especially when we're talking about the head coach. So I love it. I mean, his defensive background is something to talk about as well. He comes from the tutelage of Greg Popovich. I mean, who doesn't respect Greg Popovich more than Brad Stevens? And we talk about this team having a backbone throughout the course of the regular season. And, I don't think this is that kind of guy that's going to get into people's faces, but I think he's the kind of coach that knows how to, sort of show his cards and say, hey, look, this is the way it is. I need you to do this, that, and the other. Everything about this hire, I love, from his background to his history with the players. And of course, his coaching history, coming from the school of Popovich. I really, really like this hire.
Yeah, it feels like this one gained momentum in the last week or two after it became clear that Chauncey, who I still tend to think was their first choice, was pretty much on his way to Portland. He's a finalist now up there with Becky Hammond and a few others. Wouldn't be stunning once the Clippers bow out here to hear him named there. So ultimately, I do think once they started searching Ime more, and really like in the last week or so, myself learning more about him, became more convinced with this too. And the biggest factor for me is that World Cup run, which I love, John. Like that was my favorite.
We keep coming back to that.
But no, I had no clue he was an assistant on that staff as closely as I followed that.
I love that because they failed, right? It's like, I think I wouldn't look at that as like, oh, okay, well, they won, so they trust this guy. Like, no, this is something that they can work on. They believe in,
Well, I don't really care about the result as much as that they came out of that run with a lot of good feelings, good sentiment. They got a great start that season going after that. Kemba, got off to a great stride there. And of course, it was more bonding time for Tatum, Brown, and Smart together with him. And they were able to experiment. And if things went another way, Miles Turner could have been part of that core too. But them trusting him, knowing him, and having worked with him already in a system that he was setting up out there, I think is encouraging. I guess the only thing that I would take away from that is that Tatum's production in China that summer was a little spotty. I don't think you can adapt that to how he's going to do in the NBA or how Udoka is going to coach in the NBA. But all I know is that this guy has been overlooked as a head coach for a long time now. You heard him coming out of Philly 2 seasons ago. Was a hot candidate, not only in other spots, but also to take over in Philly. And they ultimately ended up going the other way because they got the chance to hire Doc there. So he had to sit that season in Brooklyn. And the third factor that I really like is that you get some insight on Brooklyn. That's who you're gunning for now.
Yeah.
This guy comes from inside there. I know it's not the biggest deal in the world, but you're going to hire an assistant from your chief competitor there. I think that's a plus as well.
Yeah, that one, that's not bad. That one's lower on my list. I do think of the things that you mentioned, I like here's the things I like, because we don't know ultimately what kind of head coach he's going to be because he hasn't had it. But I like a few things. I think we didn't want to retread, right? That's definitely not what you wanted. You didn't want a guy who's been recycled through the league, who has some name recognition, but is, succeeded some but failed some other places. Okay, didn't want that. We definitely wanted a former player, and he's a former player. It was important, and the Celtics clearly had said that they wanted a black head coach. So obviously that was something. You saw the list of finalists there, and that was something that they felt was really important. You want somebody that the players would feel good about, and you have endorsements from Tatum and Brown and Smart all for him. And I like the idea of an up-and-comer. I like the idea, and again, goes back to the retread. I want to see what somebody has given a shot. I feel much better about that than a person who, what they've got, what they're doing here. You want to see if you can catch that kind of rising star, train the way you did with Brad, which was, who knows what Brad's got, and it turned into something within a year, and you're like, this guy's a damn good coach, okay? And so that's what you're hoping to catch here, is like, did we get the next superstar young coach who just hadn't been given his shot for whatever reason, XYZ, and because a lot of teams were taking the easy route, as you said, a candidate in Philly, but it's like, I don't know, Doc's kind of a nice shiny object there. I'm going to go get him instead. Somebody who maybe should have arrived on the scene a little bit sooner than this, that you're catching at just the right time. So I like all of those things. I think checking all of those boxes is good. I am super, super, super interested, more than any, as I said last show, I don't care who the coach is, as long as the players like him, because I don't know who's going to be successful. So all I want to see is those guys come out in support of this move. And that's what I'm really interested in. We might not get that until it's official. Maybe they've been told not to say anything yet. But I really want to hear what Jason thinks, what Jalen thinks, what Marcus thinks, what anybody who we think is going to be part of this core going forward has to say about the new hire, because you really want them to feel good about it. And if they do, sign me up.
The Axis, the Axis trio.
Yeah. So
yeah,
all of those
that's why I feel like they had to be consulted. You
hope
Brad,
so, right?
Yeah, Brad. I think Brad has spent enough time with these guys to know that enough. I think this past year he owes them that much, at least, right? I'm thinking it from Brad's perspective, and I just think Brad's that kind of guy. I don't think none of this is ideal from the moment he had to transition into this new role, but he's going to do his absolute best to right the ship, and I think that this certainly checks that box for sure.
Yeah.
And I like the middle ground here, and Josue alluded to this at the beginning, that this is a guy with real coaching chops. He's been coaching for a decade here in systems where coaching matters, specifically San Antonio there. Right. Along with the fact that he seems to be a personality that can manage the room a little bit, get a little aggressive when he needs to, but at the same time, not be too hard on guys. It seems like this guy, and what you mentioned with him not being a retread and just all the different things that come together around his personality, I think he was the ideal candidate here. You got the familiarity, you got the coaching chops, you got the personality. Those are the three things you were looking for there. And I talked to Sherrod about him on Dome Theory last week when we were running through the different candidates. Don't be surprised if he brings in a powerful assistant too, a name we recognize like Lloyd Pierce.
That name assistant?
Yeah.
No, like a Lloyd Pierce, I think. Brad's enamored by him. We've seen Brad just gush about him in the past. I don't think he's going to get a head coaching job this time around. And I think there is a connection there on the coach Popovich coaching tree at some point along the way. So that's a guy I think that can be another good personality that can connect with guys in the room and also bring some coaching chops. He wasn't a guy I would hire as head coach, but he's a guy I would like having in that room. He has a lot of respect as well.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll see where that goes. And again, Bobby, is there anything prohibiting them from officially announcing? There's no wait until big announcements until the.
No, I think we'll hear very soon.
Yeah.
We should get that fresher soon.
Okay.
It's going to be interesting how they come up with this coaching staff, right?
The staff, Brad,
it's going to be so. I would imagine it'd be so hard for Brad to be like, wait. Really, this guy? Or hey, did you call this one? Or what about, you know what I mean? Like, he must have so many different.
I always thought that was the most
and options for him.
I always thought that was the most complicated part of Brad moving the GM, because now Ime's in here. He has his guys. Does that include Jay? I know the other guy's gone there, Detroit now, Jerome Allen. But does that include Scott Morrison? These guys that were on Brad's bench? I tend to think not. But do they have to come to some sort of compromise there in terms of who's on the bench? I think that's going to be an interesting discussion there.
Well, I was also just thinking about outside, not just internal candidates or coaches. I'm sure Brad obviously is well connected and has plenty of ideas, or at least a couple of guys in mind that would jump at the opportunity that he finds is an ideal fit. Maybe a guy or two, or an assistant that he just wasn't in his position to bring onto his staff because he already had, he's been with that staff for quite some time.
I really like Lloyd Pierce. I'm bummed Ime's not on that USA staff this summer with Tatum there, which I think would be a great opportunity for them to start to work together. But Lloyd Pierce is. So that's a guy I want to see them bring in, just because he can start to build that bond, have those conversations with Tatum. He's more of an offensive guy, so they can start to have those conversations. Ime a little more on the defensive side, which I love too, Josue. This defense needs to get back in action here. Like, this team needs to get back to being a defensive
Well, what is
group.
Udoka's calling card, would you say, as a coach here? What do you think his coaching philosophy is? What's he hanging his hat on here?
Defense first. That's why I love it.
He's a defense first guy, and I know he got to do some schematic things in Philly that worked to mix results, and that could have been personnel issues, obviously 2 years ago with that kind of mishmash lineup. But I know they had issues defending the pick and roll, and obviously did in the Celtics series as well. I don't know how much goes to Brett, how much Udoka was kind of the defensive guru of that team. So I am kind of curious what he's going to kind of bring in terms of this is how we play. Like we talked about, and if Jimmy were on here, he'd be screaming, I don't give a crap. Offense, offense, offense. No, because it's true.
No, it's like what we talked about.
That works well for the Nets.
You need two things from this team. Two things desperately. And sorry, and I'll get your thought.
No, I think you're about to say it, but yeah, go ahead.
Just two things desperately from this team. You need a coach who can get them to play with pace on offense and move the freaking basketball, which means ultimately get it out of Tatum's hands and don't let him, slow dribble it up the court, which is just, it's a choice. A coach has to say, this isn't how we're running it. We're not going to run it this way, which also is going to require a point guard to help kind of facilitate that. Number two, the return of defensive intensity. And we've been all over this offseason. We talked about it during the year, and Bobby, you would make the case a ton that it is hard when your best players also happen to be your best defensive players, it is hard to sustain that level of effort necessary. And, we just heard the comments from KD, and Leonard has been in the same boat of the intensity it takes to be a great two-way player for 40 minutes a game over the course of a season or series. It's hard. So you really just need to commit to the philosophy, playing help side defense, clogging those passing lanes and doing the things that you need to do to have a good team defense, which is as much about focus as it is locking down the dynamic scorer on the other team. But you got to bring those two things, that defensive intensity, effort, and focus, and get them to play with pace. Do we think you can do that? And Josue, you were about to jump in.
No, I was just going to get more to the, the culture of what the Celtics were before, being one of those top defensive teams. And you talk about the pace and space. That's an interesting point on your part because, that's sort of going to be interesting to see how he's able to do that between Jalen and Tatum. The point guard question is going to linger for a while because it's hard to, sort of predict what this team's going to look like offensively. But I don't know. I'm not. That's out of the two. I'm more concerned about the defense. I just think this team has to return to being one of those top-notch teams. I think, the coach hiring obviously has a lot to do with that. I think bringing back Al has a lot to do with that. Maybe not just from his, just from his physical attributes, but more as an enforcer or someone that can lead, that people will follow. Someone who will lead by example. So, I mean. That's going to be really important. I just think that's what motivates this team. In games where they played unbelievable defense, wasn't a whole lot of them, a handful of games throughout the course of the season. You saw how it resonates on the offensive end and how it motivates guys. But they have to be able to be, have that effort night in and night out in order to be successful and be an above 500 team.
Yeah, when you think about what Brad was looking for out of a coach here, it was going to be a guy who met his mold in terms of stylistically how he wants to play, which I think you check those boxes here in terms of a defensive emphasis, along with that ball movement pace that you talk about that was so emblematic of the Spurs and the Jazz, how, Brad raving about the Jazz all of last year, and just those, Popovich coaching tree teams that really emphasize movement and defense. And I think that's what you're going to get with Udoka here. But that key difference from Brad versus this guy is the communication, the connection with players, that sort of thing, the politics inside the room. And that's where this guy gets, rave reviews here. It wasn't a great season in Philly, and I think that will be the knock on him that 1 year in Philly. But again, we just look at who was in that room between Embiid, Horford, and Simmons, and that was never going to work, no matter who the coach was.
So that's the thing, too. And again, that's kind of where you want to see. And you wonder where Brad comes into play here as a coach up in the front office here, and how much he's still imparting some of his coaching philosophies on the team, which is I'm building a team to play this style. So, almost like the Billy Bean Art House sort of situation. Like, here's the guys I'm providing you because we're going to play this way. I don't know if Brad's still going to affect or influence that. What I need most of you is to implement these systems and get the most out of these guys, because almost everything you hear about Udoka in terms of the type of coach he is really about how he connects with people. As you said, Josue, that balance between a guy who can, and Goodman recently, Jeff Goodman actually just
NBC Sports
put up on Twitter. He's talking to Rudy Gay. Just a couple of quotes here, and this is exactly what you've heard from a lot of different sources, a lot of different people, and described him. He's a hard worker. He coached under a guy named Greg Popovich. Everyone on the team and staff respected Ime. Those guys all liked him and respected him. He's an easy guy to connect with. Talking about the Team USA hiring, also said he listens to players and adjusts, which again is a big thing. It's not his way or the highway. He has an edge, but he's not a hard ass. He'll stand up to guys. He's defensive minded. He values toughness. This stuff is all great. Personally, I don't love guys. This is going to sound shitty. I don't love guys who spend too much time listening. It's all good. Like, I'll listen because I want you to be able to say what you want to say. We're still going to do what I say. That's fine. You don't want to not listen to, but there's always that concern with a player coach, and a guy who comes in too much is like not a pal, but a guy. It's really different to be an assistant as it is to be a head coach. The assistant can be your buddy. You might be able to talk to the assistant about stuff that's bugging you with the head coach, and he'll lend an ear, and he can be a support guy. I'll talk to coach for you. We'll talk. I hear you. I hear where you're coming from, buddy.
Yo, he said that? You sure he said that?
Yeah. You can do that. You can play the in-between a little bit, but when you're the final word, you got to be a little bit more of a hard ass. So that's another tough transition going from assistant. It's much easier to be assistant. You really can be a guy's buddy, or more so. And the coach has to ultimately sometimes give it to people.
How much did the cachet matter to you? Because that's obviously what he's missing is he played in the league, but barely. Like that he wasn't a Chauncey. He's not a guy who you come in and it's like, oh, it's Billups. And that's something that was mentioned around the importance of this job. I don't tend to think that was as big of a deal because I do think this isn't the Nets. This isn't Kyrie, KD, and Harden going out there rolling the ball and not really needing all that much coaching to figure it out. So you can stick Steve Nash out there as a figurehead who's just going to, combine these different kinds of personalities here. I do think you need it, and Ime did this to some degree, a guy who can scheme, who can do different things to bridge that talent gap a little bit, because this still isn't, I know we think this team has more potential than they showed, but it certainly isn't a roster that if they meet their mark is going to be head and shoulders above everybody. They got to find different ways to bridge the gap with the best teams.
Yeah, and the thing I wanted to kind of fill in on the whole player-coach thing, this goes back to what we were saying about Tatum and Brown kind of not being on the clock, so to speak. But if Tatum and Brown influence this hire, and this is a guy, they have to really try hard to make it work, which means they've got to give, these aren't guys who we think are stubborn by any means. This isn't two petulant superstars. These are young guys who play hard and want to get better. I think as far as a head coach goes, you're not going to do much better than walking into a room with Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown as your superstars in terms of guys you got to coach. Totally different story. You walk in and you got to coach Harden and Durant. Not that they're miserable guys, but they are star with a capital S, mega stars who could get a coach fired if he looks at him funny. There's a much bigger pressure there. This is actually a really good opportunity for a younger coach with these guys, because they're not those guys yet. They could be in a couple of years, and not from an attitude perspective, just in terms of a power broker perspective. You're like, I wave my hand and everybody's gone, sort of thing, like Harden could do or something.
And it goes the same way for him, right?
They got to work. They got to work to make him succeed as well, which means I think they're going to be on, not to say, again, I'm trying not to throw too many disclaimers behind it, not to say they wouldn't behave well, but it really, really, really benefits them to say, okay, we got a guy who we think we like, we can connect to. Let's go play for this guy. Let's not do the thing we did last year, which is pick and choose our moments where we're going to play, get walked over by bad teams, give up, consistently come out and trailing by 15 points after the first quarter, melt down late in the fourth, sulk our shoulders and this and that. It's up to those guys to be like, we're going to help you. We're going to make it so you succeed.
I think it works the same way for him.
It works
too, right? If you have like a 20-year coach who comes in, a veteran who comes in there and says, no, this is the way I've been doing it for, before you kids were alive,
right.
I'm going to do it this way.
I know the way to do it.
That's not going to work. Right.
Yeah,
I know better. That's not going to work. And when you look at players like Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, I mean, of course, they still have plenty to prove. They want to show to everyone that they can make this thing work. So you bring in a coach that you want to impress, that you want to work hard for, because you know that he's got a lot to prove as well. And they all want to show the city exactly why this is a good fit. And that's another good reason. That's another reason why I love this hire as my light goes off. This is the first time it's ever done. I don't think it likes being on when it's really light in here.
Those batteries, baby.
No. I think it's the light being like, listen, man, it's not dark outside. Stop messing with me. And then it goes off. It refuses to stay on right now.
Yeah. So I think coaching's a little bit more important than you do, John. But I do think the pressing roster questions are still far more important than how good Udoka is going to be. They got to figure out what Smart's status is going forward. I think that's a ginormous question. They got to figure out who's worth continuing to grow here on the bench and who should be filled out with veterans in those positions. Because, we talk about how Udoka's going to handle the stars here. He obviously has a big task, too, in terms of developing Rob, developing Romeo. There's still kind of that half and half aspect of this roster where you got 3 guys ready to go here, but you also have a whole bench last year that we saw just isn't there yet. And then they're going to have to make decisions on a bunch of other roster spots as well here. And, couldn't you possibly add to this group? Who's the right guys to add to this group? Is Tristan part of the fold here? I still tend to think no, but that's an outstanding decision they have to make. So all those things matter much more to this upcoming team, and that falls on Brad, obviously. He's done well so far, as we've seen, but there's still a lot of work to do here. And all that stuff is going to matter a lot more than what Ime brings to the table as a coach. You got to have some stuff to work with here.
I don't disagree with any of that. I will say it is interesting. I just following comments and Twitter does anybody have you seen negatives yet? I haven't really seen anybody come out strongly against this. It's very rare when you make a decision like a basketball decision like this and have such universal praise for it. We've been talking about it for 20-something minutes. We're going to welcome in our insider.
The
Following comments and Twitter. Hey, Sherrod, I think you got our. Does anybody?
I do.
You're playing us.
You're playing us.
He was locked in.
I am so locked in.
And Sherrod, you can do all the hoping you want, but Tomei is not walking through that door again, all right?
Mute that YouTube, buddy.
Not walking through that door.
I'll give you a second to pull yourself together. But Sherrod's here. We're going to get his take as well. I've muted him. Give me a thumbs up when you figure out where that sound's coming from and whack it. Somebody just said nobody here was negative.
You know, Sherrod got like 17 tabs open right now.
Then I see Felger and Maz. Here he is. Is he good? Is he good?
Yeah, he looks like he's good.
Can I let him back in the room?
Yeah. He's got the Birdman hand rub.
Sherrod, we've kicked it around for 20+ minutes. Right now, it seems that the vibe is overwhelmingly positive. You tell us your take and any insights you have into Udoka as a coach and what kind of coach you think he's going to be here.
Well, I think the biggest thing that he comes in with, which is unusual for assistant coaches, is that.
No, I'm just kidding.
See, Josue, I was going to stay away from Nia Long.
Sherrod hated when I did that too.
The long and short of it was I was going to stay away from Nia Long.
Are we going to get Nia Long a podcast? I don't know. That's a big question here.
First and last mention of Nia Long. Go ahead.
Let's make it happen. Okay. No, but the fact that he comes from the Popovich tree, I think that cannot be that can't be overstated enough. That how important it is to have someone that's coming into the organization who doesn't just have a feel for winning, but is basically. I mean, he was at the foot of the grand poobah of the coaching tree, the coaching forest when you think about Popovich and what he's meant. And to me, and Bobby, I heard you mention earlier about, he hasn't really had the kind of illustrious career that a Chauncey Billups has. You know what? When you look at where the Celtics are at, they're going to need someone who understands how to get the most out of those guys, those late first, early second round free agent type guys that, frankly, he can relate to because he was one of them.
What's up, Ian?
And the other thing too is that he has a very good reputation throughout the league with players. When you look at San Antonio, one of the biggest pickups that they have from a free agency standpoint was LaMarcus Aldridge. You go back and you look at who was key to that. Udoka was when they were together in Portland. So he understands the game about how you've got to be able to be. You've got to connect with the players. But the point that John made earlier, and I thought it was a good one. We don't know how he's going to be able to handle moving 6 inches over now. We don't know how that's going to play out. But the key for him, I think, is putting together a staff that will complement whatever he understands are areas that he needs support in.
Have you met him, Sherrod?
Yeah, we've talked a few times. Good guy.
What do you think of him?
I think he's a good guy. I think he'll be a good coach. I think the jury is still out on how good a coach he will be, but there's no question from knowing the game standpoint, he checks that box off. Having the experience of being in a winning environment, a championship caliber environment, checks off that box as well. But for me at this point, the key for him is putting the right staff together that's going to complement him. And then the other thing too, and you guys talked about it earlier, the fact that your two best players have already signed off on this being someone they want.
Makes a difference. Yep.
I think that's a huge difference. I think that's one of the things, if you want to start breaking down, some of the things that Brad Stevens has just absolutely aced in his short time as the GM, as the president of basketball ops, that has to be near the top of the list. And that is making sure your major decisions involve your major players. They don't have to make the decision, but keep them in the loop as to what the hell you're going to do.
Okay. Time for one of my analogies. Okay.
Oh, sure.
Here we go.
Breakup. Another breakup.
No, I'm going to put you on the spot.
Does it involve Nia Long? That's what I want to know.
No, I'm putting you on the spot a little bit, Sherrod. Okay. Now, we asked you were just asked what kind of coach he's going to be, and you said the following things. You said he's a good guy, and then you said he knows the game of basketball. That's the what do you think of my friend equivalent of she's nice. Okay. That's what you just gave. Okay. You did not give a glowing over the top. This guy's a superstar up and comer rising.
I don't think
I'm just saying if I was going only by what you just said, I'd be like, ooh, I was like, that was kind of lukewarm praise. So I'm going to circle back to it.
Yes. Thank you.
It was a little lukewarm. Did you mean it that way?
The reason it was lukewarm, John, is because I just think that there are a lot of unknowns about him that I'm not trying to put him on a pedestal the way we did his predecessor.
That's a good point.
That's good. That's good.
Yeah.
He deserves a blank slate to come in here and establish who he is, because we don't know how good a head coach he's going to be. But we do know that he comes from a good pedigree. We know that he's been in the league. We know that the team's best players are all in on this guy.
Yeah.
But we really don't. To me, like I said, and I hate to sound like a broken record about this, but who he puts together for his staff is going to be critical to his success. Because this isn't like hiring Mike D'Antoni, who no matter who he puts on the staff, the head coach is going to be that guy. Or a Tom Thibodeau staff where he's going to be that guy. Udoka is going to need to have a village around him that's going to fill in whatever gaps that he's going to have as a first-year head coach, because there will be gaps. It's inevitable. But from what I know about him and just in the times that I've communicated with him, I think he'll be fine. But again, he needs to surround himself with the right types of assistant coaches in order to be successful.
Yeah, and you didn't just mention the Popovich tree, which again, in like football circles, obviously like the Belichick tree. I mean, some of those guys are successful, some of them are not. It is hard, to go out there and to do it. And not only that, some people who've gone out there and tried to emulate Bill Belichick, like McDaniels or Charlie Weiss or these, Bill O'Brien, you can't be that. There's only one. But what I like the most about it is I don't believe he's in the Greg Popovich style of coach. I think he had a different style than Greg Popovich in terms of his overall approach to dealing with players. And I like the fact that Greg Popovich glowingly signs off on him, because Greg Popovich doesn't say nice things about anybody. Well, he does. But you know what? He's not a guy who's going to just toss around praise just because he feels like it. I think if he says it, he means it. And you certainly want, among all, not just having coached under him, but among all of the endorsements I like the best is the fact that Popovich really, really, really believes in his guy. And again, you're always going to have a loyalty to your old assistants and you want to see them get ahead, but you can also say nothing. And I think he really believes in this guy as a head coach, which I think is a good thing. And as we said, we have the player endorsements as well. I really do want to see them come out publicly, hopefully when this is official, and say some nice things in here, because that's going to make Celtics fans feel a little bit better. But I assume that they will. I assume that they're going to like this move. I'll ask you this, Sherrod. Do you think he was their first choice, or do you think they read the tea leaves on Chauncey and thought, we're not going to get this guy, so let's just make this move now?
That's a great question, John. I've been texting around trying to get a sense of that, and haven't heard anything definitively on that. But I get the feeling that this was their guy. I mean, if Chauncey was the guy that they wanted, they would have offered him to him. And if they did offer it to him and he said, I don't know, well, then they immediately move on. I think the fact that this falls in line with what Brad has already started off doing, and that is making decisive decisions and moving on to the next thing to do. You look at the trade for Al, that came about ridiculously quick. You look at bringing in Udoka, again, another fairly quick move when you think about it. And it makes sense. I mean, I guess I would feel a little bit differently if, like, for example, everyone knows Chauncey was the guy that I would have loved to have been here. But when you look at Udoka's body of work and you look at Chauncey's, you can make a legitimate case, a very strong case, that Udoka has a stronger body of work and is the more qualified candidate. And I have no problems with that. But again, just like if Chauncey were hired, the key was going to be who he surrounded himself with. The same thing holds true for Udoka.
It's interesting, too, because Danny moved the complete opposite, right? At least in my opinion, right? It seemed like he took his time with almost everything, whether it was free agents, whether it was making the right trade.
We can wait till the offseason.
When to cash in those assets. I'm sure a lot of Celtics fans have an opinion about that he may have waited way too long in some cases, whereas Brad has been the complete opposite. I don't know, just something to think about, something I've noticed so far, because it's just the complete opposite compared to Danny. And for someone that's been working underneath Danny for 7 years, it's interesting to see how he's deciding how he's going to do things. You look at a coach like Ime Udoka coming into a situation where he was under Popovich, for a long time, went to Brooklyn, had a couple of other situations, which is a good thing, compare and contrast. Also, I don't think he's the kind of coach that's thinking he has to be Popovich. I think the advantage of being in that situation for so long and other situations is that you're able to take all that and create your own style. And, I feel very confident, or at least I should say comfortable with this hiring with guys like Tatum and Brown signing off on it, but also the fact that all three of these guys, including Marcus Smart as well, you put him in there as well. They all have a bit of a history together with Team USA.
What does that say? Because it is interesting that came out through the reports now that Smart gave us the seal of approval too. I didn't necessarily go into this offseason thinking that Smart was, and I felt this way at the deadline too, part of their future. And I know obviously you want to make them feel that way. Yeah, you want to make them feel that way now, and they can ultimately change.
You're smart. You don't want to go. You're like, hey, I like this guy too. Let's do it. Let's go. I'm
just interested how they view him ultimately because.
Or not, he sends that text. Yo, I heard they might get Udoka. Is that true? And they're like, we knew about that a week ago, bro.
This is such a critical time with him because whether they extend him, whether they decide to bring him in the next year on an expiring contract, which I think could be really tricky, or they decide to make a significant move here to move on from him. All three of those paths are tough to call.
I don't mean to completely circle back to Smart and do this all over again. But over the last 48 hours, I am totally lost about what the organization thinks of him, what the teammates think of him, what his place is here, whether or not he's a net positive or negative. I'm all over the map on it. I really don't know anymore.
Don't listen to those reports, John. Don't listen to those reports.
The reports are what looped them in. Brad said I consulted Jalen and Jason. He didn't say Marcus.
No, I'm talking about the Marcus reports, the negative Marcus reports about his, the friction with Brad.
It's not even Marcus reports.
I don't want you to think that Brad and Smart. Oh no, that was Brad and Kemba rather. But just the overall vibe in the locker room was off, and that he's on the wrong side of the.
That's what I'm wondering. What side of things he's on?
Yeah, I feel like you think
that's all.
Yeah, he's on the wrong side of it. But it has nothing to do with those reports, does it? Or you're basing this off of
a little of that, just a little of just listening to. Just through our conversations, it's a developing opinion, as I like to say. As time moves on, I'm trying to figure out where I land on this because I've always I don't bat stuff around usually. I've got kind of I'm really all over the place on Marcus right now. It's interesting. I got to tell you guys another thing. Through the course of the season, the most popular name that we would see in the chat was Grant Williams, which was freaking hilarious. You know who's number one name in our chat the last couple times we've been out here?
Robert Williams.
No.
Ooh. Cornette.
What's your favorite side dish on Thanksgiving?
Mashed potatoes.
Yam.
Yam Madar.
Yam Madar is freaking blowing up the chat.
He's everywhere.
He'll be on the team next year.
Unreal. People are convinced Yam is the savior.
Yeah, shout out for
all
Greg.
Yam needs to do is be better than Semi, be better than.
People are answering real. The answer is stuffing. But obviously,
no, it's mashed potatoes, man. Come on,
no,
man.
Stuffing is the king. Not only stuffing, the best side dishes on Thanksgiving are your first stuffing, then your second stuffing, then the third stuffing, and then everything else after that. Okay, if you're entering Thanksgiving with fewer than three stuffings, you're doing it wrong. Anyway,
I was getting Yam tweets a long time ago.
But
fans are excited about
two different stuffings. That's true. That's a good point.
Yes, you need two different stuffings, if not
three.
If
there's two different versions of the same side, that's the best side. Yeah. Good point.
But Yam, people are all over that. It's cracking me up here. This is like he's kind of taken on that Gershon Yabusele,
No, I think that's
mystery man sort of vibe.
Bobby's fault. Bobby mentioned him, and I think that's how the chat got all excited. If I'm not mistaken.
I don't know.
No, people are tweeting me about him like before I would even pick up on him. Like a guy on draft night, we were logging off, and I was like, "Oh, they got Yam too," and John was like, "Good night."
Thanks for coming out.
All right, we out.
Bobby was like, "Yes." He's texting me. We could go another hour on Yam alone. I was like, I'm all set.
No, he's young.
Thank God it wasn't locker room.
He's like 20 years old, fairly young guy.
Yeah, he needs some development. But again, if you want to bring him in here on that two-way deal next year, it's nice to have a guy closer here than playing out in the Israeli league. Again, they kept Gershon out in China for too long, and that was a problem.
There was a reason why he was out in China. And it wasn't because they were just didn't want him to come over.
Yeah.
They saw the same
There's
video
a reason.
Hey,
There's a
Gershon
reason
and,
he's got all those stamps in his passport, Bobby. You know?
if you're interested in some Spanish League basketball next year, Gershon, Vincent Poirier, they're teaming up on Real Madrid next year. That's going to be a front court to watch.
Rather than left him out there too long, the question is whether they ever should have brought him back. The brought him, period. The legend of Gershon Yabusele would have lived on forever if they just never brought him back. You know,
the dancing gear.
The French Draymond Green.
That is funny because some teams do that. They have those. What's that guy's name?
Orion Green. Orion Green.
This guy Sergio Yul has been like a Rocket stash guy for like a decade in Madrid, and like their fans are still like, "Ooh, maybe he'll come one day."
Yeah,
to be their head coach, because he'll be too old to play.
Yeah.
Those people. I mean, I always have an appreciation for people like that. You know, who go, this guy, this, that, because there was a couple of those guys. I give them their props. Talking about a 16-year-old kid named Luka Doncic years ago. So I'm not saying that's the case with these guys, but I will applaud those people for keeping tabs. But you know, some of these guys. It's just
but those guys.
Man. Some of these guys, man, it's not it. It's not it.
Those guys go in the first round, though. Yam was like, what, 47th?
Yeah, Dragan Bender also goes in the
but
first round.
That's
the thing, though. Like, the guys who were –
you had to bring up Bender.
You know, it's like
Nicola, whatever it was, Skeetishvili. You know, like you've got a lot of guys who come and you're like, oh, whoops. You know, like –
Don't forget about Darko.
Yeah, Darko.
I guess Jokic was second round too, so it is a bit of a mixed bag.
Former Celtic, Darko Milicic. Was he here for 48 hours, 24 hours? It was like the shortest stint of any player. Oh my God. Yeah. So anyway, moving off of this stuff, this is good. It's a good thing. We're looking again, hopefully, to get some player reaction. We want to hear from the team on this, coach, as well. But what's the next? What are we looking at next order of business here? It's obviously you have, I think most of any other moves are probably going to be done after the draft at this point, I would think. I mean, do you see another big move coming? Anybody see anything big happening here prior to?
It could. I don't think they're dependent on the draft because they don't have a pick.
They're not, but I mean, the whole idea of you're going to make a move and you want to trade another first-round pick, you have to wait until after. Are you going to keep making moves now, or are you going to wait until the new league year and then you start doing stuff there? After everything is complete. I'm not entirely sure.
A lot of their stuff's going to be trade dependent, but most of that stuff will obviously include a pick, like filling that TPE. Although that TPE does have to be filled before the league year ends because it expires at that point. So that's something we could see done before the draft. Other than that, you're looking at Tristan, what's going to happen with him and that big man front court as a whole, and then a big Smart decision at some point. Are they going to extend them? Are they going to extend Rob? Those are the things you're looking at.
Jeez.
No, I mean, you don't have to trade them. You could extend them. And then if you don't do any of those things, I think it's a weird setup next year. Like everyone's gonna be like, "Oh, is Smart sticking around? The Smart part of this is Smart gonna get traded?" There's just gonna be so much chatter all year.
I don't think he's off limits, but I just don't think he's a must trade guy.
No, I don't either. I think you make the right deal for him, and if not, you keep him around. But it does get complicated in that room. Like, there's a guy who wanted to get paid 4 years ago, and now he's still not getting that respect, that money, that kind of treatment that he thinks he deserves. Like, I think that's. With all the stuff we've read about now, too, just in terms of him in the room, it gets really complicated there when they're trying to mend those fences in a very, frankly, dysfunctional room from what it sounds like.
Yeah, I need Sherrod to uncover the truth here. So I'm not your editor. I can't assign you, but I think that this one's got you written all over it here.
What you got?
Yeah. No, I mean, he'll get it. He doesn't have it yet, but he'll get it.
I thought you were saying, okay.
Yeah, he'll get it. Because it is interesting. You really want to see, I am really interested with where things go. Again, it's interesting with me with the Smart thing, how many people have not only have moved to the opinion of you got to get rid of him now. Like he doesn't
I know that's not how I feel. Again,
I said I'm getting that from a lot of places.
I'm getting that too. And I'm surprised.
Yeah.
I'm surprised to
this
see
is-
Bobby on that train too.
No,
Get
and
off
you know
that.
what? Me and John kind of flipped on this. It's very interesting because John
Yeah.
has been saying forever,
Get him out.
this guy doesn't have
He
value.
was saying that
You're
in
not
the
going to get
bubble.
anything for him. And then I mention a Kyle Lowry trade, and you're like, you're going to trade Smart for Lowry?
not
Why
that.
would you do that?
Yo, you
It's
said
not
Smart
that.
and Robert Williams. That's,
You were throwing a lot into that trade. What
Yeah.
I said was
you're doing a lot that night.
Because I want to make it happen.
you're putting a lot of eggs into the basket of a 35-year-old player. That was more the issue. Not that so this is where you and I
And that's the problem. The fact that you're trying to put in new money for an old, machine.
I thought that's what they need.
Again, you need that if you're like on the cusp of something.
If you're
Yeah.
there,
They
that's
could
what
be.
Bobby,
They
Bobby, you keep trying to make moves for like now. Like Fournier was a great move for a team that was close and had everything except for wing depth. The Celtics had, 1,000 problems, and Fournier wasn't fixing anything in any real sort of way. I feel that way with Lowry too. I love Lowry, which is to say, if somebody left Lowry out on the curb, and said, hey, sent out an email to the neighborhood, who wants a Kyle Lowry? I'd be run out my door. I'd be like, oh my God, this guy's perfect. But if someone puts it on eBay
perfect.
and a bidding war starts, like, I don't know that you want to get into a bidding war.
Well, there's a reason
that you want to give up a ton of assets.
You want it to be the Toronto Raptors doing the guy a solid. Okay, look, we see where you are, your stage of your career. We're clearly hitting the reset button here. Let's put you in a situation where you can win and succeed. And obviously, we want some assets as well.
So forget Rob.
First, or maybe a young guy, and obviously Tristan Thompson.
Yeah, so throw Rob out of it because I understand why you guys don't want to move him. If it's just Smart, Thompson, and a future protected first, you wouldn't do that?
It's tempting. I'd think about it.
I think that would be a slam dunk, especially since you moved Thompson on that deal too.
If I do that, I'm under the assumption that the Celtics have no interest of bringing Marcus back. Well, obviously, but I'm saying like money wise, like you're trying to make this thing work. But I just don't like.
I just think Lowry's so much better than Smart.
Yeah, he's also 8 years older. 7 years older. You got to factor it in. It all depends. Like money matters here.
Smart's gonna get a raise. Like that's.
But you do have a chance here. If Lowry really changes that room, brings the passing that you need. Much better shooter, a guy who can threaten to score off the dribble, defender, all these things. You have a bit, not like a Brooklyn big three, but you kind of have like a Phoenix big three here, and we see what the power of that would be.
Yeah,
like,
don't call it a big three though.
Here's the thing about those big threes that you talk about, and when those teams come together, you know why they come together? Because they want to play together. They want to play together.
Well, Lowry will have to want to play here.
Want to be here.
Oh, well, that's not good.
Why would he want to be here? What's
chance to win? Chance to win.
You think he's got a significantly greater chance to win here than all
Listen,
other?
You know how I feel about Miami. He could go to Miami. I'm just not seeing it.
New York.
Anymore.
I'm thinking L.A.
New York.
But see, this is the thing.
I'm thinking L.A.
New York, L.A. All these cities. Those are the cities that the Celtics, when guys have options, they kind of choose those options more times than not.
But Celtics aren't going to be on top of that list. That's true.
I do think the Lakers one would be interesting because they could flip Schroeder for him, and that probably appeals.
Yeah,
to
Lakers.
Toronto.
I think that will be at the top of his list.
Yeah.
I just can't. I can't even embrace the concept of him ever being a Celtic.
I don't think he wants it. I don't think they have anything of value to give up in a sign and trade. I think he has choice in the matter here.
The only way it happens is if the Celtics, the Raptors are doing them a solid. Like, look. Here, whatever Celtics, whatever you want is fine. Like that kind of deal. And obviously, that wouldn't be a Marcus Smart. But yeah, sorry. Go ahead, John.
No, that's it. I just don't see it as plausible from all sides. It's one of those like I want that player, but there's no path to getting him. And I think Lowry kind of fits there. Because
he would be a great fit. I actually agree.
Yeah.
He'd be a great fit, but Chris Paul would be a great fit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
LeBron.
There's a lot of guys that would be a great
Dennis Schroeder.
Yeah.
Goodman jumping on.
No, I'm not going to co-sign a
Bullshit.
Dennis.
I like Dennis.
Goodman co-signing this today was exciting to me.
I know. That's why he got.
Yeah.
When somebody agrees with Bobby, he does get really excited.
Goodman's been right about just about everything this offseason. Like he's on a roll here. I don't like his B.O. Brown thing though. That's where we're always going to butt heads. I wouldn't do that in a million years.
No, that's his greatest hit. What do you mean?
That is.
Saying that all year long, man. That's just
Play the hits.
That's his chart-topping single right there.
No one wants the new stuff. You go to see the Jeff Goodman show. You want him to play the hits. So,
Yeah. For real.
So that's definitely one of them.
Brogdon's interesting too.
You line yourself up with Jeff Goodman. That means that you buying that. You're buying that. You know what I mean? You're buying that album, that CD.
Like I said, I think we have
that
to look
point guard thing. So like, if you're keeping Smart and you're largely just rolling it forward here, you got to really be confident Smart can play that point guard spot all year long.
I bet they need something. This is a really important one. Like I said, I'm willing to give up a lot to get the guy you absolutely know you like. I'm not willing to. So again, the trade a whole bunch of stuff guy is Lonzo, if it's doable. I'm not sure if it is. The see if you can sign him and squeeze him in is Dinwiddie, and then you start to go below those guys and see.
Well, here's
bargain basement sort of picks, But could you convince someone like Dinwiddie to say, "Come here, you have there's no competition for you. You're my starting guy. You're the point guard. You get to play with these guys."
I just think there's too many teams going to be interested in him to pay big money for him too.
Maybe.
Yeah, plus he's going to be thinking about it. Oh, I'm going to be a third option. Maybe that means a lot to him. Maybe it doesn't. It's hard to say.
I think you remove some pressure when you go somewhere and you don't have to be the primary guy. But I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe.
Yeah, but if you're like if you're more of a seasoned vet, though, right? I mean, this guy's got to
cash out. He's got to get that
man.
big
He put
deal
together
here.
one heck of a demo reel, if you will, for potential, max money suitors. I don't know. I just think he's going to be one of those guys just out of the Celtics' range.
Yeah. Oh, there goes John. John's gone.
See, Lonzo, that's different. Robert, Marcus, some picks. But that still won't get it done. That still won't get it done, right, Sherrod? Would it?
I don't think so.
It's not.
I don't think so. Lonzo, look, listen, you're talking about, trying to move into the suburbs. Lonzo is like top of that high rise.
Yeah, good for Rod's real estate.
Yeah, you just don't have the capital to get that high rise real estate crib.
Yeah, I also for the money he's gonna make, as you mentioned there, Sherrod, I still don't know if because that's your big three, and that's why I'm against Ben Simmons too. People tossing around that idea. Like, that's not a flyer. That's not, let's just see how it goes. That's all right. We're locking in on this guy is the third big three.
That's a nosedive. That's not flying. That's a nosedive.
Yeah, that's it's Tatum, Brown, and Simmons. Tatum, Brown, and Ball for the next 4 years. So that's why that one's a little more tricky. But at some point, you do have to make a decision there. Who's going to be that third guy? The interesting thing here, and this is something to really watch this offseason, Brad keeps talking about flexibility, and the math panned out that in this Horford trade, if you jump out of that contract next year, the partially guaranteed one, you do open up a max slot next offseason. And the only way that you can maintain that is keeping Smart on that expiring deal, not extending Rob, letting Fournier go for nothing. You need to bite some bullets this offseason, make this a bit of a bridge year to maintain that cap space. That's going to be really interesting because I think it's tough to bite that bullet this year. But if you really think someone would come next offseason and you want to have that space open, you do have to do all of those things to maintain it. So that's going to be a really tough decision for them this summer.
Well, if I'm not mistaken, Robert's going to qualify an offer for $10 million next year, right?
Yeah, they could bring him the restricted, so that makes that one much easier.
You don't have to. You're not under the pressure to having to re-sign him on top of trying to chase down a top tier free agent. So
right,
yeah.
I mean, that's Again, next summer is the year, especially now that it happened a while ago, but they traded off Kemba. You're positioning yourself nicely.
You could go after Beal. You could if he wants to come. No, we don't have you, John.
No, we still don't got you, John.
No, John.
See, Beal, my mind is Jalen says, F this, I'm out, get me out of here. Like, I just think that's
a good point.
I think that's the path to Bradley Beal.
Can you, and Sherrod, you can fill us in a little bit on this. Like, would there be enough interest there to warrant I don't want to say throwing out a year because they could still be competitive this year like they were last year to some degree before all the nonsense hit at the end. But you're really not putting yourself in the best position to win this year if you're kicking the can down the next summer.
No, I mean, and that's really the dilemma that they are going to run into. I mean, what's the smartest path? Do we make moves now for the moment, or do we start building it to create avenues for growth in the future? This is where Brad's going to earn his money. This is where he's going to have the potential to have a franchise-altering impact, similar to what Danny did back in 2007 when he went out and got Ray Allen and he got Kevin Garnett. And then next thing you know, they literally went from worst to first in the NBA. The Celtics aren't nearly in as just, destitute as that team was at 07 squad. But it's not like they rolling with the big dogs either. I mean, they're kind of in that middle. They're like in that middle class of the NBA, which is not where you want to be. You either want to be at the back of the line or the front of the line. In the middle is not where you want to be, and that's kind of where they are right now.
Yeah, and that Ainge approach is how you win it all. You save all that flexibility for the biggest talent. You put all that talent together and you figure it out. And that's what Brooklyn did here. That's what Golden State did. That's really the only way to win in this league. Like, you can have one-off runs like Phoenix is doing here, and who knows, Phoenix might even be better than we can imagine with those core two there. But for the most part, you compile the biggest stars and you make that run. So that's the argument for going all in on a Beal free agency or whoever else it would be over the next year or two. It's just you really siphon a lot of players, assets, whatever you want to call it, in the process there. Like, Fournier's going to walk for nothing. All of a sudden, that Hayward deal that you made is just gone. You're probably going to lose Smart in that process for nothing. You're probably going to lose Rob eventually if you're going in that path. So, it's a risk, but what else are you going to do here? People blast Ainge for the Kyrie thing now. It's like, oh, could you have just kept Rozier and that young core? I don't think it's certain that young core grows into a championship team. You got to go after the biggest free agents, the biggest trade targets, put the best team possible together, and it just didn't work out. It could have in a different world.
No, I'm never going to question that deal. I mean, I think you do that deal 100 times out of 100. You got a chance to get a perennial all-star who has more than 1 year left on his deal, and in exchange, you're giving up a wing who you got somebody coming in and replace Jay Crowder. You give up a point guard, and you're getting a better point guard in the deal. What am I missing here? How is this bad? I mean, on paper, obviously it didn't work out, but we're all working. Everyone is working with hindsight. Hindsight never fails, never loses.
Right.
But in that moment, it made absolute perfect sense. And you got in the connection. His dad used to play in Boston. I mean, I can't hate.
It was all about Hayward.
He made some decisions that I did not agree with. This was not one of them. I don't know how you can.
I'm with you too. If anything, I give Danny props for having the stones to do it. To this day, some people would say that some players that still doesn't sit right with them that he did that. Given what Isaiah Thomas went through that year, but that's Danny, right? I mean, Danny's gonna do whatever it takes. I used to say Danny will trade his mom if it makes the Celtics better. Like, he's just that kind of ruthless approach. So, you know what? I'll even do you one better. I mean, some people Celtics fans want to go back into time and say, you know what? Celtics should just re-up on Terry Rozier and they should have never traded for Kemba Walker. Like, how do you not do that deal if you're
I agree on that one too.
To replace one all-star point guard with another, like, no GM's going to go the other route. No GM's going to say, you know what, I'm going to give the young guy some run here.
So
Terry Rozier at that time, who obviously wasn't even one of their top, younger players in comparison to Jalen and Tatum.
So the only reason I would disagree with that, Josue, is if they looked at his medical and said, this isn't great, but we'll deal with it. We'll take the risk. It's Kemba. Maybe it'll work out.
Because again, I take the risk because they're going to look at Terry Rozier, and let's face it, he didn't have the greatest attitude throughout that year, right? I mean, and rightfully so. Terry Rozier took a lot. He had to take a cut in his playing time and his touches. Some games it seemed like he played 6-7 minutes, and you could see in the locker room how frustrated he was some nights. So I don't know. I just think you take all of that together and you think about what Kemba was throughout the course of his career before he came to Boston. Perennial all-star, the kind of player he was, the reputation he had. You compare it to what the Celtics went through with their point guard and Kyrie Irving. It was just a no-brainer. It was almost like the fixer who's going to come in and sort of help things from the locker room's perspective and on the floor. Man, those first couple of months of his tenure in Boston, Kemba Walker it just seemed like it was a match in heaven
I agree with that.
for
But
the organization.
Now that we know what we know about the knee, it was I don't know. Like, we'll never know, Sherrod. Like, we don't have the medicals. We don't know what Ainge was looking at when they signed that deal. Maybe it was just bad luck.
It's like having that flawless Honda right after you hit that, 150,000 mile mark. Like, man, this thing has.
I know, but then you got off the dealership and the tires went flat, and all of a sudden you need a new.
But with the oil change, man, this car is never going to break down, and then it breaks down, and then it breaks down again and again and again.
Like 3 miles from the lot.
One thing after another. It's something different. It's just what happened with Kemba.
Yeah, but the thing with Kemba was that typically when guys have the kind of season he had in terms of injuries, there's a clear pattern before you bring them into your family, your team. Kemba was Mr. Iron Man in Charlotte. I mean, he played big minutes, didn't miss games, did all the things that made you feel as though when he gets to Boston, he's going to be good because he's been good everywhere. But in the back of your mind, you're thinking, yup, this Honda Accord has got a lot of miles on it. It looks good. It looks like it runs pretty good. But at some point, in the back of your mind, it's going to break down because there's a lot of miles on this thing.
Yeah, but Sherrod, there's a difference between 150 and 200,000, right? Let's face it, 28, 29, yeah, for guards, that's a little up there, but he's still underneath 30, right, at the time, right? And you're thinking, okay, well, let's be realistic. This is going to be a 5-year window, but I think the Celtics we're looking at is 3 years of consistent, production, offensive production, someone that they could rely on at that point guard spot. But then one half season into it, things started to, go south.
Yeah, and never got better. And I think that's the thing that's really frustrating was that they went to painstaking lengths to help Kemba be physically ready for the games that matter, which are the playoffs. And it didn't work. It just didn't work. And the reasons we'll never know fully what the reasons were, whether, Kemba didn't take his rehab as serious as he needed to, or whether he did that, but just the basketball gods had other plans for him. Yeah. We're never going to know. But bottom line is Kemba didn't get it done. I mean, at the end of the day, he didn't get it done. And that's why he's not here anymore. Because if he were having those injury issues, but when he was really healthy, he was playing at an elite high level consistently, he'd still be here. But what's happening, he'd come back and he'd play great. Then he'd have a couple games not so great. Then he'd play great. It was all over the map. You can't have one of your big three giving you that, that up and down game. That doesn't work. Yeah. You're not winning. You're not going anywhere. Literally, his season was, I thought, symbolic of their season. They were a 500 team, good, bad, about the same. That's kind of how Kemba was.
Yeah, but that stretch in April, man, talk about a tease. What was that? 6 games, averaging 32, points and scoring at a high rate. What was it? 50, shooting over 50%. He was knocking down threes. It was just this. It seemed like the Celtics had planned it out perfectly for him to go into the postseason and ride that momentum, but it just crashed. The car crashed. It was a wrap. Now, question is, Sherrod, it's not total loss though, is it? Like, what's next for Kemba? I don't think he's futures in Oklahoma City, but if they end up flipping him, what's the destination you think that he ends up going?
I think he'll wind up in New York. I think it just makes so much sense for where he's at, what that team needs, and all you got to do to get somebody out of OKC is dangle a first-round pick.
For real.
I mean, that's literally all you need. We'll give you a half-eaten ham sandwich that's been on the floor for 7 months and a first-round pick. We got a deal. You got a deal.
It's like Danny in 2014. Man, just flipping picks. Just anything for a pick.
Yeah.
So I think Kemba will wind up in New York. I think he'll do well there because the level of expectations for them is different than it is in Boston and a lot of cities. They basically got to get to the playoffs again. Get to the playoffs. Get to the second round, maybe. Season success.
He's going to be repping BX. You know how he is. What if he does that? That'll be great for him. That'd be a great story.
Yeah,
he'll be thrilled.
I hope his story does have a happy ending because he is a good dude. You want to see him do well, but bottom line, he just didn't get it done when he was in Boston. Point blank.
I would just love to see him compete, at a high level, just a deep playoff run, whichever situation it is. Maybe it is New York, something like that. Because I just, that the talent and what he's been through, it's a tough break. It's a tough break, but it's one that had to happen between him and the Celtics.
Now Oklahoma thinks, and obviously they lost the lottery last night, probably rightfully so, with how they've handled it. Yes, and
Sherrod, Pistons.
Yeah, Detroit. But, they did. It's almost like karma in a lot of ways, the way this stuff shakes out. I know Houston kept their pick. They probably didn't deserve from a karma perspective. But Detroit did a lot of good things the last year or so to redeem themselves, go young, find some nice projects to roll with going forward, like Jeremy Grant, and build a bit of an identity.
Don't forget about Stewart.
Yep, Stewart. Former Syracuse commit didn't end up coming. That's becoming like a storyline now around that.
I wasn't going to bring that up, Bobby.
That
didn't happen.
Dior Johnson committed Oregon the other day, and I'm just like, oh, here we go again. But anyway, Al Horford is going to be introduced by the Celtics tomorrow. Word on that just came down, so we'll have another presser tomorrow.
Reintroduced.
The way this offseason's going, it's feeling like we're going to have 2 shows a week with how much news there is. So keep it tuned here. Subscribe to the podcast version. Real quick, Sherrod, before we go, I didn't get you a weigh in on this. As far as Udoka's staff goes, what do you think we're going to see? Some of his guys or some of these Celtics guys staying?
I think you'll see a mix of the two. I think for some of the Celtics guys, they may be moved from the bench to maybe scouting role. I wouldn't be surprised if that happens, but I don't think Udoka's going to come in here and just absolutely, gut everyone. And I think that may have been something that him and Brad had a conversation about before he took the job. How does he plan to proceed in that regard? I don't think there was any type of mandate where Brad said, you must keep this one and this one and this one. But I would be very surprised if you didn't see at least 1 or 2 assistant coaches stick around.
Yeah, that's overall how I feel about this hire. Bit of a compromise. It's Brad's style. It's a different flair. And to some degree, you're going to still see Brad's imprint on this team just in terms of how they play and how they approach things. And Udoka is going to be a guy who hopefully can manage the personalities a little bit differently and bring some new perspective into that room. So overall, I'm a fan. Josue gave it the seal of approval. Sherrod, going to see how it goes.
Yeah, I'm going to see how it goes. I mean, I just it's hard for me to get really, really, really pumped up about Udoka only because everything on paper makes me feel like these are going to be pretty good. But there's something gnawing at me in the back that's just like, it's got to be the right situation, right scenario, right people around him in order for him to, I think, be really great. Because there are very few coaches who, as assistants, establish a certain style about them that when they become a head coach, that's going to be how they work. We saw that with Thibodeau. We knew he was going to be a defensive taskmaster when he got a chance to run his own team. Udoka, he understands the game. He's a former player. I think he'll do a good job. But he hasn't shown enough as an assistant to where you have a sense of what he's going to be like as a head coach. So the jury to me is still out on him, but I'm optimistic that he's going to do well. But by no means am I sold on him.
All right, so we'll do a Spotify green room at some point this week. Stay tuned for that. For now, Ime Udoka, new coach of the Celtics. For Sherrod, for John, who just dipped out of here. I don't know where he went. But
real quick, can we talk about Jay Williams for like a minute?
I thought you were going to say real quick, can we talk about Nia Long for a minute? That's what I thought you were.
That can't be a minute, man. That's going to take a while.
Williams.
How does that happen, Sherrod? How does that happen? Come on, man.
Boston can't win.
Come on, man. Let's keep it 100, man. You know how that happens? Because people forget, okay? When Kyrie Irving was saying all that, talking about the city of Boston and racism, all that, he just conveniently loves to leave out the history of what Red Auerbach means to this league, what Bill Russell meant to this league, what the city of Boston, or at least the organization meant to the game of basketball, and then here comes Jay Williams. Oh, look at the Celtics. They got diverse. Oh, the first black head coach. Come on, man. That's embarrassing.
Rivers.
Huh? Yeah, exactly.
Like, 8 years ago.
Listen, we're not talking about like Bill Russell. We're not talking about Sash. We're not going to talk about we're talking about Doc Rivers, dude. You see that dude damn near every damn week when you've been on your job. This is the issue, though, Josue. This is what it bugs me that
like
people
20 years.
that people outside of this area have this fixation with conflating the Boston Celtics and their history with the city of Boston and its history. They are not the same.
Thank you,
They
Sherrod.
never have been.
I knew you feel me on this one because obviously, you didn't grow up in this city and you know the vibes. You know how people, and you've been here long enough to know to differentiate, obviously, and to also feel passionate about it. I
have this conversation at least once a month with somebody, having to put them in check that the organization, the city are not the same. They're not the same. And if you take a nanosecond to actually get your head out your ass and actually do some research, you will see that the Celtics as an organization they've been trailblazers in almost every significant moment historically in terms of race relations, in terms of diversity. That's why, the fact that they're hiring him, it's a little surprising that they're not hiring like, a Becky Hammond or someone like that to continue that long history of being the first. But for him to come out of his mouth with that bullshit,
it's ridiculous, man.
Come on.
Jay, Google's your friend, okay? He's your friend. Hit up Google next time. You're gonna come with
free. Google is free.
It's free, yeah, exactly.
You don't have to pay to get that intel.
It's absolutely
that was just
free.
Unfathomable.
And while you're at it, why don't you check out the Last Pass, if you will. If you need a book, Jay, I got you. I'll put you on to the Celtics history. We'll have a whole discussion about it. I grew up here. Let's do it. We'll make a day out of it.
Well, that just goes back to some people were feeling some type of way about the fact that it seemed to be set in stone that the Celtics were going to hire a black coach. This sentiment, the fact that Jay Williams is going to sit there and be like, "Oh, a black guy's coaching the Celtics? That's new." That's still what they're fighting against. Because to some degree, obviously, we say this is insane. How do you forget 8 years ago Doc's here? But at the same time,
how do you forget that?
That man won a championship.
He won a chip. It wasn't like this was some coach that just happened to come through town and win a couple games. He won a chip. He won a chip. And if you look at his career perspective, Doc is the 10th winningest coach all time. We ain't talking about some dude that just got a couple W's and rolled through town. Get out of here with that. You talk about Bill Russell, who's one of the all-time greats, who's going into the Hall as what's the other position besides player? Coach.
And this is a sentiment they're fighting against. This is why it is great to have another, hopefully prominent, successful black voice at the head of this organization.
See, Josue, I wasn't even going to go down here because I know it pisses me off. Thanks, Josue.
I love this energy, okay, because we needed this, okay? We need to get this off our chest, man, because honestly...
but you know what's good, Josue?
I'm going to wrap up. I was like, wait a minute, hold on. We got to,
This is a strength, though. When Kyrie said that stuff, it was like, who's going to answer that in the Celtics organization? It's like, is Brad going to say something? We know what Danny said. It was like, oh, who's going to be the voice of the Celtics on this issue? And there was really, Brown came out and said what he said, but in terms of a management position, there wasn't anybody in there. So, there's been people there before, but now there wasn't. And now there is again, which is great. And some people were feeling some type of way about the fact that it was almost mandated that a black coach had to be at the head of this team. But in the end, you're still looking at someone who paid their dues, was probably overdue, which is the real conversation here. And, this is what you wrote about, Sherrod, a couple of weeks ago, the fact that this is an 80% black league and there's only 7 head black coaches, now 8, fortunately.
Yeah. And right now we're down to the final 4 in the NBA and 3
out of 4. I guess Jalen got to update that tweet. Okay, one last thing before I head out of here. A few years ago, I just remember this right now, and I'm so glad he did this. Shout out to my co-host, my guy, my friend, Cedric Maxwell. Man, the city of Boston for Black History Month was going to honor Red Auerbach, and there was this huge outrage. Shout out to Cedric Maxwell for speaking out and saying, listen, okay, what Red Auerbach did for the NBA, for blacks in the NBA, come on, Sherrod. If Red Auerbach doesn't make Bill Russell the head coach, you think there's going to be a head coach anytime soon? If he doesn't go out and start 5 starting black players for the first time, I mean, I just, again, the history behind the NBA and what the Celtics, the organization, have meant to it compared to the city of Boston and what it meant to America are two very different things. I don't know.
And what always gets me, and folks just don't understand this, is that Red, what he did wasn't popular. It wasn't embraced by his community. He went against the grain.
Right.
Like,
and he didn't flinch.
He said, white, black, doesn't matter. If the kid could play, I want him on this team. I want to win championships.
It's one thing to take that stance when you are in an environment where it's conducive to making those type of societal changes. But that just wasn't where Boston was at that point in history. Right. And Red still did not let that sway his decision to step out, to do what no one else in the NBA was doing, to listen to other owners tell him, Red, I don't know if you should do that. Red's like, I don't give a F what you think. I don't care. I'm doing what I do. I don't care whether he's red, green, yellow.
Trailblazer.
That's my guy.
That's right. So, and all the other organizations, they started to do the exact same thing. But yeah.
And they realized, damn, he really can play. Well, maybe we should get some players like that. You think?
Yeah. And the rest of
Josue, you get me all riled up, man. I'm ready to beat somebody's ass right now, Josue. see, I've been just having a nice, peaceful, laid-back, mellow summer. Now you got me all fired up.
Man, you're telling me, Sherrod, I thought people were joking because Bobby mentioned it in the group text, and then before we go on, I was like, wait, he actually tweeted that?
He tweeted it fast.
I found someone, you know how Celtics fans are. Someone screenshotted it, and once I saw it with my own two eyes, I said, okay, I got to talk about this. This is being addressed. So,
that didn't take a double take to be like, what? Like, this guy just comes out and is like, congrats to the first black Boston Celtics coach. And it's like, huh? That doesn't even take.
It didn't take me long to dig to find it.
First time you read that, you're like, huh? All right. Jay Williams, you'll have to talk about that on TV tomorrow.
He needs an apology, Cam. He needs an apology in the worst way. In the worst way.
Just the fact that you work at ESPN and you don't know that. But anyway, Bobby Manning, Josue Pavon, A Sherrod Blakely will be back. The way this offseason has gone, maybe sometime this week, who knows? But Ime Udoka is the new Celtics coach. We'll talk to you soon.
We're out.